Do you remember Brad Pitt? For decades, he was Hollywood's perfect man. The face, the charm, the roles everyone wanted, the life everyone envied, but behind the red carpets and magazine covers, his real life was quietly falling apart. Alcohol replaced silence. Anger replaced control. Family moments turned into court records. And even more shocking, the collapse didn't happen after fame faded. It happened at his peak. How does a global icon lose everything that truly matters? Rare photos and untold truths will be revealed in this video. Watch until the end to understand why Brad Pitt remains a name the world both admires and deeply regrets. Brad Pitt was born on December 18, 1963, in Shawnee, Oklahoma, but his childhood truly unfolded in Springfield, Missouri, a quiet, conservative town where expectations were clear and deviation was rarely tolerated. His father managed a trucking company, a man known for discipline, routine, and control. His mother worked as a school counselor, gentle in contrast, but unable to soften the rigid structure that defined their home. The family was deeply religious. Church was not optional. Belief was not questioned. From a young age, Brad learned that approval came through obedience. Feelings were something to suppress, not explore. Anger had no place. Doubt had no language. And vulnerability had no permission to exist. He later described growing up with a constant sense of guilt, the feeling that he was never quite good enough, never fully aligned with what was expected of him. Inside that orderly household, something began to fracture quietly. Brad was sensitive, observant, and imaginative, traits that did not fit easily into the masculine mold valued around him. He learned to perform versions of himself for survival. The polite son, the agreeable boy, the one who did not cause trouble. But suppression has a cost. What cannot be expressed does not disappear. It waits. As a teenager, he felt trapped by predictability. The idea of staying, of inheriting the same life, the same routines, terrified him. Hollywood was not yet a dream. Escape was. Acting at first was not about fame. It was about becoming someone else. Somewhere else. A way out. He enrolled at the University of Missouri, studying journalism with a focus on advertising. On paper, it was a sensible path. In reality, it was another compromise. Just 2 weeks before graduating, Brad made a decision that would permanently sever him from the life laid out in front of him. He packed his car, left Missouri behind, and drove west of Los Angeles with little money and no guarantees. But the emotional patterns of his childhood came with him. The need for approval, the fear of failure, the instinct to hide pain behind performance, the inability to process anger safely. These were not left behind in Missouri. They simply followed him into fame. And one day, long after the world would call him a legend, those buried instincts would resurface, not in silence, but in collapse. When Brad arrived in Los Angeles in the late 1980s, the city did not greet him with opportunity. It greeted him with indifference. He shared cramped apartments, took odd jobs, and spent his days chasing auditions that rarely led anywhere. Acting at this stage was not glamorous. It was survival. He appeared briefly in television shows, played background roles, and accepted commercials simply to stay afloat. Rejection was constant, silence even more so. Casting directors saw his looks before they saw anything else. He was offered roles that required little dialogue and even less depth. Being noticed came easily. Being taken seriously did not. Slowly, frustration grew. Fame was not the dream. Legitimacy was. He wanted to disappear into characters, not be reduced to a face. Then, in 1991, everything changed. A small but explosive role in Thelma and Louise transformed him overnight. The scene was brief but unforgettable. Hollywood did not just notice him, it consumed him. Magazine covers followed. Interviews multiplied. The industry decided who Brad Pitt was before he had time to decide for himself. Success arrived faster than emotional readiness. Roles poured in. Expectations hardened. He was no longer allowed to fail quietly. Every choice became public. Every relationship became commentary. The escape he had sought from Missouri turned into another form of confinement. Brighter, louder, and far more unforgiving. Behind the sudden rise, old instincts resurfaced. the need to please, the fear of disappointing, the habit of swallowing discomfort rather than confronting it. Brad learned how to perform confidence while privately questioning his place in the industry. He began to understand that Hollywood rewarded surfaces, not interiors. And as his career accelerated, a dangerous pattern formed. The more successful he became, the less room there was for vulnerability. The boy who once wanted to escape control was now being shaped, marketed, and owned by forces far larger than himself. Fame had opened the door, but it had also quietly closed every exit. By the mid-1990s, Brad Pitt was no longer chasing Hollywood. Hollywood was chasing him. Films like, say, Seven and Fight Club didn't just elevate his career. They cemented a myth. Dark, magnetic, untouchable. The camera loved him, and the audience followed without hesitation. Magazines crowned him the ideal man. Interviews repeated the same questions. The industry sold a version of Brad Pitt that felt effortless, confident, complete. But perfection, once manufactured, becomes a prison. Each role reinforced expectations. Each appearance demanded consistency. There was no room to change, only to maintain. Behind the scenes, the contradiction deepened. The more iconic his image became, the less he recognized himself within it. He began to resent the simplicity of how he was perceived. Being admired for looks felt hollow when he wanted to be understood for depth. He chased complex roles not out of ambition, but out of desperation. A quiet attempt to prove there was more beneath the surface. The pressure was subtle but constant. To stay desirable, to stay relevant, to never show uncertainty. Vulnerability became a liability. Silence became a shield. And gradually, the distance between the public figure and the private man widened into something dangerous. Success did not bring peace. It brought surveillance. Every decision echoed. Every mistake amplified. The perfect life sold to the world left no space for error, growth, or confession. And in that golden cage, isolation began to feel permanent. The image was flawless. The cost was invisible. And the cracks were already spreading. Fame did not arrive quietly in Brad Pitt's life. It arrived like a flood, sudden, overwhelming, and impossible to control. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, he had everything the industry promised would bring fulfillment: acclaim, influence, wealth, and global admiration. Yet, privately, something inside him was unraveling. Alcohol became a companion long before it became a problem. At first, it was social, a way to dissolve tension after long shoots, a way to quiet the constant noise of expectation. But over time, drinking stopped being occasional and started becoming necessary. It filled the silence that success could not. It dulled emotions he had never learned how to process. And it offered a sense of control, temporary, fragile, and deceptive. The anger followed slowly, then all at once. Not the kind that explodes in public, but the kind that simmers, the kind that leaks into tone, into distance, into impatience. Those close to him later described mood shifts, emotional withdrawal, moments of intensity followed by long periods of absence. Fame had taught him how to perform strength. It had not taught him how to be honest. As his career entered its most celebrated phase, the contrast became sharper. On screen, he embodied control, danger, masculinity. Off screen, he felt increasingly disconnected. The pressure to remain the same man, desirable, composed, iconic, left no space to admit weakness. And weakness, when denied, does not disappear. It mutates. Relationships suffered quietly at first. Emotional availability became inconsistent. Presence became conditional. Work schedules provided excuses, but they were not the cause. The deeper issue was avoidance. When conflict appeared, retreat felt safer than confrontation. When pain surfaced, numbing felt easier than naming it. In rare moments of honesty years later, Pitt would admit that he was drinking daily, not to celebrate, but to escape, to turn the volume down on a life that had grown too loud, too exposed, too rigid. Addiction did not look dramatic from the outside. It looked functional, successful, invisible, and that made it more dangerous. Publicly, the image remained intact. Red carpets, awards, praise, But in private spaces, hotel rooms, trailers, long flights, the erosion continued. Alcohol loosened restraints. Frustration sharpened words. Emotional distance widened. The man the world admired was becoming increasingly unrecognizable to those closest to him. There were warning signs. Moments when exhaustion broke through the mask. Interviews where he spoke of emptiness, dissatisfaction, the strange hollowness of success. But the industry did not slow down to listen, and he did not know how to stop. What made this phase especially destructive was not just the addiction. It was a refusal to acknowledge it. Admitting a problem would have shattered the illusion of control, and control to him had always meant safety. Losing it felt unthinkable. As years passed, the weight of suppressed emotion grew heavier. Anger found fewer filters. Patience shortened. The distance between public admiration and private reality became unbearable. The life he had built was impressive, but it was not sustainable. And then, in one moment, confined, pressurized, and inescapable, everything would surface at once. The collapse was no longer theoretical. It was imminent. In September 2016, the carefully maintained structure finally broke. What followed was not a rumor or a whisper, but a public rupture that no amount of fame could contain. After a flight from Europe to Los Angeles, an incident aboard a private jet became the moment everything spilled into the open. The details were fragmented at first. Reports on argument, raised voices, fear. Then came the consequences. Within days, Angelina Jolie filed for divorce. The announcement stunned the public, not because Hollywood marriages were fragile, but because this one had been presented as different. A humanitarian power couple, 6 children, a shared mission, a private life that appeared disciplined and intentional. That image evaporated overnight. Investigations followed. Child services became involved. The FBI reviewed the incident related to the flight. No criminal charges were filed, but the damage was irreversible. Legal outcomes do not erase emotional impact. What mattered most was not what the reports concluded, but what the children experienced, and how distance replaced trust. Custody arrangements shifted. Access became regulated. Silence replaced familiarity. For the first time in his life, Brad Pitt was not losing control abstractly. He was losing connection. Phone calls went unanswered. Time together became conditional. The role he valued most, that of a father, felt suddenly fragile. Public opinion fractured. Some defended him. Others condemned him. Media narratives multiplied, each competing to define what had happened behind closed doors. But inside, the collapse was quieter. It was the absence of routine, the absence of noise, the realization that the family structure he believed anchored him had dissolved. This was not a scandal that passed. It lingered. Court filings extended for years. Reconciliation remained elusive. And the man who once defined Hollywood masculinity was now confronting something far more destabilizing than failure: irrelevance within his own home. For the first time, escape was no longer possible. There was nowhere to retreat, only the echo of what had been lost. After the collapse, there was no comeback tour, no public defense, no carefully managed redemption narrative. Instead, there was silence, long, deliberate, uncomfortable silence. For someone who had lived under constant attention for decades, disappearing was not strategic. It was necessary. Brad Pitt entered Alcoholics Anonymous quietly, not as a headline, but as a man stripped of illusions. In those rooms, status carried no weight. Fame did not soften accountability. He listened more than he spoke. He learned a language he had never been taught: how to name responsibility without justification, how to sit with shame without numbing it, how to confront anger without letting it explode outward. Years passed with little explanation, fewer interviews, no attempts to reframe the past. When he did speak, it was carefully, often painfully honest. He admitted to daily drinking, to emotional absence, to the damage caused not by one moment, but by years of avoidance. There was no attempt to minimize, only acknowledgement. Work returned slowly, deliberately. Smaller roles, supporting performances. Nothing designed to reclaim the spotlight. And then in 2020 came a moment that felt less like triumph and more like punctuation. An Academy Award, not for leading man, not for spectacle, but for restraint. On stage, the speech was brief, grateful, grounded, absent of bravado. There was no declaration of rebirth, no promise of transformation, just a quiet recognition of the people who had supported him through silence, and the understanding that some losses cannot be undone. The Oscar did not signal redemption. It signaled survival. A man still in process, still accountable, still separated from parts of his past that could not be reclaimed through awards or applause. For the first time, success did not look like victory. It looked like humility. When history looks back on Brad Pitt, it will not see a single story. It will see a contradiction, one of the most recognizable faces of his generation, yet a man who spent much of his life unsure of who he was when the cameras stopped rolling. His legacy is not confined to box office numbers or iconic performances. It lives in the tension between image and reality, between admiration and absence, between success and the personal cost required to sustain it. For every role that defined an era, there was a private moment left unattended. For every applause-filled night, there was a silence that followed. Brad Pitt did not fall because fame disappeared. He fell while it was at its brightest. And in that fall, something uncomfortable was revealed, that admiration does not equal understanding, and success does not guarantee emotional safety. The world celebrated the symbol. The man behind it struggled to keep pace. Redemption in his story is not clean or complete. Some relationships remain distant. Some wounds remain unresolved. And perhaps that is the most honest ending. Not every story concludes with reunion or forgiveness. Some conclude with awareness. The price of being iconic is rarely visible in photographs. It is paid in private, in missed moments, in choices delayed until consequences arrive. And sometimes the most powerful legacy a man can leave is not perfection, but the courage to confront who he was when perfection collapsed. The curtain closes quietly, not with certainty, but with truth.